Welcome to Just Minding My Business Radio, where we are moving at the speed of God, learning what we didn't know we didn't know. I'm your host, Ida Crawford.
And I'm your co-host, Ruth Haskins.
So grab a pen and paper and get ready for information that you can use.
Welcome to Just Minding My Business Media, LLC. Just Minding My Business Media, LLC, the digital magazine experience, is the place to be seen and heard. Curious? Contact us at jmmbradio@gmail.com or visit us online at jmmbmediallc.com to view the current edition of Just Minding My Business Media, LLC, the digital magazine experience. More people should learn to tell their dollars where to go instead of asking them where they went. Roger Bacon, English philosopher and Franciscan friar. Today we welcome Aaron Rubin, who is an attorney, CPA, and CFP. As such, he runs a wealth management practice that integrates tax, financial planning, and investing. His purpose is to help his clients minimize their tax liability and keep more of their equity compensation. He works with pre-IPO executives and early employees at late-stage tech companies. Financial Adulting is Aaron's first book, and it's a guide to help young professionals navigate tax, investment, and estate planning. Welcome, Aaron.
Fantastic to be here.
Off to an interesting start. So tell us a little bit about how you started off and came into this place that you are now working in.
Sure. So long story. I'm not going to bore you with all the details, but I was an accounting undergrad, and then I decided to go to law school because I had nothing better to do, and so I ended up. I went to University of Illinois, where I met my wife, and with a background in accounting, her father, my father-in-law, said, "Would you like to work for me?" And I said, "Yeah, sure. That sounds good." You know, all of my friends in law school are working just insane hours, and they're never going to spend time with their families, and that's not what I want. And so he said, "That's great. Why don't you come join me in a few years? In the meantime, go into public accounting," which I did for 3 years. So I spent 3 years in public accounting, where I actually got my CPA, and so after those 3 years, I joined him. That was like 13 and a half years ago, and it's been great.
Okay, so now we often take routes that we don't plan on to get to where we are. Tell me a little bit, and our listening audience, about what it is that you do. A
Sure.
lot of people want to know more about wealth management. And my first question to you is, do you deal only with stock options and that sort of thing?
Sure. So the short answer is no. It's not the only thing we do. It's just one of those things that we do really well, and we do it better than most. And that's because, we have a background in tax as a firm, and we actually do tax returns. We prepare tax returns. We do tax projections, in addition to the strategy around, stock option sale and purchase, which can be pretty tricky. And so, we have lots of other clients in lots of different areas, and it's not just a high tech thing. Certainly, the book that I wrote is not just a high tech thing. It's one of those things where I'm passionate about helping people, get to that right place. And again, my expertise is in that pre-IPO side, but certainly not the only thing I do.
Okay, so we're going to break this up into 2 parts. First, would you tell us what work you do with initial public offerings?
Sure.
And pre-IPOs.
Yeah. So before a company goes public, right, it's pre-IPO, and if you have stock that is at a pre-IPO company, it is very difficult to sell it. If you need to sell it, it's difficult to get loans on it. It's a very nuanced space, and there are tax pitfalls everywhere. And so what I do is I help people think through some of those decisions so they hopefully don't fall through those tax pitfalls, and hopefully get to keep more of their own money at the end. And so less goes to the government.
Okay, because I know that there are so many different not little organizations anymore, but there are things like Robinhood, and people are dabbling, and often they don't know what they're doing because they do get this information, and it sounds really important to know if someone offers you an IPO or you see it come up, to know exactly what it is that you're doing, because it sounds as if it's something that you could lose your ever-loving shirt in if you do it wrong.
Yeah, well, and things have gotten more complicated, not less, over the last couple of years. So the big, I don't want to say improvement because that's not right. The big change, I think, over the last couple of years has been the introduction or reintroduction, really, of SPACs, special purpose acquisition companies, and these SPACs, which are often called blank check companies, because what happens is a company goes out and usually run by, wealthy individuals and investors, and they say, hey, give us a whole bunch of money and later we'll tell you what we're going to buy. And so they get a whole bunch of money, and then they have 2 years to find something to buy. And so and that's how a number of companies have gone public recently, has been through SPAC. And the reason why the companies do it is because the original company is already public and it's just an acquisition. There's not as much regulatory red tape to get through, and it's a little bit easier on some accounts, but it's certainly fraught with peril. And certainly over the last 10 months, we've seen SPACs just get crushed. Companies that have gone SPAC, a lot of times the companies that end up going public, certainly not always, are not really ready to go public. They're sort of taken a little bit early because the people who are running the SPAC, their incentive is to get a deal done. Because if in 2 years they can't get a deal done, they're forced to return all of the investors' monies with interest. And so there are people who have lost a lot of money in SPACs, and IPOs in general are just more fraught with peril, just because they are. If we look at data going back through the 1980s, from 2020 to 1980, right, we have 40 years of data. The first day return for most IPOs is astronomical. It's easily double digits. But if you look at the average 1 year, 2 year, 5 year returns, if you compare an IPO company to just the benchmark that it should be in, whether it's size and type of company, if you look at the benchmark, it actually underperforms typically over those periods of time, despite the fact they had a big first day. And most times, the people who are listening to this, you're not going to get in to the stock before the first day, right? Because people do buy stock before it comes out. There are banks, and they have people, they connect their best customers, and you're probably not one of them.
Yes.
And
you're unknown, you're
right,
unknown.
right. And so most people, what they have to do is they wait until the moment the stock comes out, but it's already jumped up by the time the vast majority of people can touch the stock. So again, getting into a stock the first several months is just not something that we typically recommend. We work with people who are at the company currently. They have their stock compensation, so they got in well before the IPO happened. So there's a lot of upside potential there. But most people, that's not how it works.
Along that note, there was and still is a great amount of noise about cannabis companies. Is that what happened with them? Because a lot of them are not performing well. Some of them are, but a lot are not performing well. And when they first came out, it was, like everybody was jumping on the bandwagon. So that's the same sort of profile?
Yeah, I'm not a I'm not a cannabis expert in any sense of the word.
Mhm.
But I mean, as I understood cannabis, a lot of them had to go through the Canadian exchanges. I don't think they could list on the US. I believe, again, not we're stretching my expertise here. But I believe, and so then there's other issues with the Canadian exchanges, and again, it's a slightly different world. And like everything, right? It becomes hot and then it's not. The certainly, the legalization path, where I think everyone thought, once Biden was elected, that would someone someone somewhere would say, okay, this whole cannabis thing has gone too far. And we can't jail people anymore for this. And it's and half the states says it's legal anyway. So it's sort of a farce. It still hasn't happened. So again, a lot of these companies, if you are dealing with cannabis, if you touch it, you can't bank. And it's a very difficult space to be in. Again, I know people that are attorneys and CPAs that specialize in it, because it is a very niche market. But I've always felt, and again, this is this is me not knowing anything about cannabis, but I always felt that big tobacco at some point was going to get in it. They were going to take control of it. They have so many inroads in so many markets. I always felt it was a matter of time before they really took it over. But I don't know. But I think they're waiting for legalization too, because the like Philip Morris, right, is a publicly traded company, and if they start dabbling in illegal federal activities,
Yeah.
they don't need that disclosure on their balance sheet for the SEC. So
Yeah, that would be interesting, but yeah, it would not be bad. It would not be a good thing. So let me ask you, and I'm going to be honest, I know very little about this, so I want people who are listening to understand that I am probably in the same place as many of you are. We started out talking about IPOs. Initial, what is that again? Initial
public offering.
public offerings. And some people may be in that arena, or within their companies or what have you, and have the opportunity to get in on this. But once you're in on it and you are actually part of it, what is the worst tax mistake they can make or that you've seen?
I've seen a few. The worst is they fail to recognize there's going to be a gain for tax purposes when they purchase the stock, not when they sell the stock, when they purchase. So oftentimes, let's say a stock is you get in a company fairly early on, it's worth $1, and so they say, okay, we'll let you buy this company for or the stock, this share for $1. Maybe it's 100,000 shares or 200,000 shares for $1. And you say, that's great. Well, this company might not go anywhere. I don't want to put $200,000 into this company. And so you wait several years, and wouldn't you know it, you're actually at a really good company, and all of a sudden that stock that was worth $1 is now worth $11. So there's now a $10 difference between what you're going to buy it for and what it's actually worth. Now, when you buy those shares, and again, the company doesn't have to be public to buy the shares, right? You go out, you buy the shares, you're recognizing $10 a share for income tax purposes potentially. And if we're talking about 200,000 shares, we're talking about $2 million of income that you don't have. You need to come up, with the tax for that. But if you didn't know about it, which I've encountered, it can be a pretty devastating thing. Or if again, there's some strategies some people take, where they try to buy the stock, early in the year, and then if the stock ends up tanking, then they'll sell it before the year's up, because there's some rules for incentive stock options that get baked in. But if let's say you anticipate your company going public, and you buy a whole bunch of shares, and you owe a whole bunch of tax, and as it turns out, the company doesn't go public, the IRS does not care. The IRS is going to say, that's great, I'm sorry that you can't sell these shares, but we want our money. And that happens.
Ooh.
And it happened a lot in the year 2000, 2001, where people just got stuck with these enormous tax bills and no way to pay them.
Okay. Word to the wise.
Right. Word of the wise. If you're going to start buying large quantities of shares of company stock with your stock plan, you need to see a tax person. Don't start doing things and then find out on TurboTax that you owe hundreds of thousands of dollars. That's not the way to do it.
Wow. I can only imagine the shock that must be. That's horrific. So, what is the best investment decision you've seen?
From the IPO perspective, it's been people that decided to sell. I've seen people not sell and it works out really well. I was back in 2013. We had a couple of Apple clients, and our thing was, well, geez, Apple's at an all-time high. Sell Apple. And most clients, thankfully, didn't listen to us. And of course, their stock, it's, I don't know what I don't know if it's quintupled or more, in that time. But for the vast majority of people that we have worked with, especially in that IPO realm, very few have regretted selling sooner rather than later. So you may be familiar with Coinbase, which is a large cryptocurrency storage company and cryptocurrency promoter. A lot of the people who are working at Coinbase decided to sell as soon as they could. And they worked out phenomenally. They got, the company, it was technically, it was called what's called the direct listing, which is different than an IPO in some respects. But on their direct listing, they were able to sell on day one. And, I think it IPO'd at 250. I think it peaked at 350 a share. And so, so the people that I knew sold, at 250 or 350. And I think today it's down to 100, down to 50, something like that. I mean, it's been crushed. So again, selling sooner than later, you'll almost never regret it.
This is a really awesome conversation. And like I said, we have a vast variety in our listening audience. But before we go any further, in case there are people out there who have these types of questions because they may be new to the whole idea of IPOs or just the whole stock market and tax situation, could you let people know how to get in touch with you?
Yeah, well, I think the great place to start for us is our blog. We have great articles. We have really in-depth discussions about what some of these concepts are. So we have, one thing we haven't talked about, maybe we won't because it can get in the weeds in a little bit, is something called an 83B election, which is an early exercise of stock options with a tax election. And we have a 3-part article on it. We write voluminously over these tax and stock issues, because it's really what we do, really well. So blog's great. So that's our website, wrpwealth.com. Obviously we're on LinkedIn, we're on Facebook. I just started TikToking. And so IPO graphs is our TikTok handle. And I just put I think I'm on part 5 of my stock option primer. I've done 3 videos just on the alternative minimum tax alone. So again, there's a lot of good stuff out there.
Thank you for that. There's just an awful lot to what you're talking about. And I think people will not be able to take all of this in. So I'm going to just put this out there right now. We would love to have you come back and talk more about this and sort of break it down, because the whole tax issue around anything to do with the stock market, if you don't know what you're doing, it's disaster. It's just a disaster waiting to happen. And I'm thinking that maybe at another time when you come back, we can break it down a little bit more, a little further, so that we can see how things work together. Okay, you talk about stocks, you talk about buying stocks, you talk about stock options, and puts and calls. That's about as much as I know. Don't call me on what I'm saying. But yes, puts and calls, and people hear these terms because they've become part of the national language, so to speak, for many people. And yet they'll step out there and try to do something and get really burned badly, or nothing will happen. That's the other side. Nothing happens. You just have some stocks that are kind of sitting there looking at you and you're going like, I don't know what to do with them. So we want you to come back and talk more to us about this. And I'm not finished with you yet. I've got another couple of questions.
All right.
When you're talking about your stocks and stock options, a really important part is estate planning for your stock positions. And how do people set that up? And I know that's something that your company obviously must handle. So at what point should people really consider their estate planning as far as their stocks and et cetera are concerned?
Yeah, I think, the sooner the better. If you're looking at, a couple $1 million worth of position, a lot of and it's pre-IPO, the stock plans themselves they have beneficiaries attached to them. So, you just make sure you have your beneficiaries, in there, and just make sure that they're going to get the money. Otherwise, it gets to your state, and then you got probate problems, and you don't want it. You don't want any of that. And then, but for those who have, hundreds of thousands, millions of shares, that's when when the company really starts to have a product, and it's like, okay, this thing might have legs to it. You really need to start thinking about your bigger estate planning issues, like should you be gifting some of that before? Can you maximize things like qualified small business stock, which is a $10 million tax exclusion? Can you leverage that? Can you multiply it? And again, I tell clients this all the time. I said, I can spend tens of thousands of euro dollars on this. And part of the problem is if you get it wrong in terms of, let's say your company isn't the next Apple or whatever it is. You've spent, tens of thousands of dollars foolishly, but that's the risk. So, it's again, the longer you wait, the more certainty you have, the harder it is. The sooner you go, the easier it is, but the more expensive and potentially, stupid you'll look. So it's a very, very difficult balancing act. So, I've talked with people who've done it both ways. I have someone who has, tens of millions, of this pre-IPO stock, and just sort of came in once it was worth about, $30-40 million. And it was like, well, once it's at that point, you can't really do anything with it. It's so massive in a tax sort of way, you can't just exercise, right? I mean, if you exercise a $50 million position of stock, you're going to owe tens of millions of dollars in tax, and you have to find a way to pay for it. And there are ways to do it. There are ways to pay for it. Believe me, if you need money, there's someone out there willing to lend it to you. It's just about how much it's going to cost you. It's as true for those, horrific, check cashing companies, you see in strip malls as it is for really wealthy people who are trying to buy tens of millions of dollars of stock. So there's always someone out there willing to do it. It's just a matter of how much it's going to cost. So I love the job because I get to work with some really smart people who try to solve for that stuff too.
That was going to be my final question, because this is so intricate, and you are dealing with huge sums of money that can really be, there can be catastrophes, there can also be great wins. What is it that you love about what you do?
I would say that I love the puzzle. I love the, how does everything fit together? Someone comes in and they have a problem of sorts, right? And it could be a $20 million, it could be a $5 million problem. And they're trying to figure out what to do. They're trying to, again, it could be, I mean, some of them are saying, how can I afford to buy, a really nice beach house and, wherever. And some are like, hey, I want to make sure that I have enough to take care of my kids and grandkids. And it's about trying to solve for that. And how can we try to maximize what these people are going to be able to do. And seeing how the tax and the estate and the charity, I love talking about charity too. I think charity is so important. Love talking about that, and how do we maximize people's goals while achieving everything that's, is important to them, and being able to have the most possible to do that. It's just, it's super fun. It's just a really fun thing. And I get to call on people who are, these experts, in the field, that, in the estate planning, and sometimes I call tax people. And when I was at Deloitte, there's a guy, his name is Barry Neal, a brilliant estate tax guy. I mean, and you know what? Sometimes I call him, and he charges me money, but you know what? He's brilliant. And I love working with brilliant people because I get to learn things every day. So I mean, there's so much I love about what I do. So.
Excellent. Yeah, and it shows. It shows in your presentation and the way you're talking about it. So I know we have talked your ear off and asked all kinds of questions, but I've really enjoyed speaking with you. And one more time, let people know how to get in touch with you.
Yeah, so WRP Wealth, our website, you can, if you want to schedule an appointment, you can schedule an appointment there. If you want to just check out the blogs, and hopefully you'll learn something.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Aaron Rubin, for being with us and for just making it not necessarily easy listening, but making us listen and learn. I've learned a lot from you tonight and look forward to hearing more from you. And one of the things that I got from this is that it's good to be wealthy.
Right. No kidding. Right. There are some problems that are good to have.
Yeah, there's some problems that are good to have. Thank you so much for being with us. I really appreciate you.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
Okay.
Thank you for tuning in to Just Minding My Business Radio. I'm your host, Ida Crawford.
And I'm your co-host, Ruth Haskins.
We hope you enjoyed the show and appreciate you stopping by. Many blessings